it was June 2010 I started, but where I was coming from was from being distracted with a lot of things, and right at that point, I resigned from working corporately, and I was working with BlackBerry, and my territory was the South, which is very important to the book because I did a lot of my research while traveling in the South, and and then I resigned from it, which at the time everyone thought is crazy, but nowadays it's looking like incredible prescience, and and so basically I just had the summer to do whatever I wanted to do. So I started in June, but I wrote pretty much 12 hours a day for the entire summer, half of it in Trinidad, at my, at various places in Trinidad visiting my family. So really it took about 3.5, 4 months of nonstop writing to produce Molasses. I find if I do a first draft on the computer, it's difficult to go through it again to do. It's very tedious. So my way around it is to handwrite the first draft, and so I have to type it anyway. And then while typing it, that's when I edit and sort of prune and work out the second draft. That was mostly done in Trinidad, like I said, different places where I grew up as a kid, like San Fernando, Princestown, Point Fortin, these places in the south of Trinidad.
And would you say that there was a very significant difference between drafts 1, 2, and 3?
Yeah, for sure. I think draft 1 is all inspiration, right? It's like sometimes I would want the characters to do something, but when I would start writing, they would get a mind of their own, and they would just do what they want to do, and it would surprise me. It would shock me. Pretty much all the characters surprised me in terms of how they chose to do the things that I wanted them to do. So that was more about inspiration and more about getting it down, and it's exhilarating sometimes. Well, most of the time, actually. Second draft was more, I think, it was more tightening and clarifying and making sure that the inspiration, making sure that there was tightness in the technique, so that what I was inspired to get out got out properly and didn't just suffer from, the expediency of getting it out in the first place. So that's the second draft, and then the third was more structural. It was more sort of looking at the entire structure of it and deciding and trying to organize it in a way that made more sense, but also stayed true to the original inspiration. I sort of selected a dozen people who I felt were, for whatever reason, they were people I trusted, that I knew were readers, and who I thought would have an opinion that would add to the book. So I went through that process with them, and they were allowed to read it under the understanding that I would grill them extensively about their thoughts to it. And so, they were very kind, and they're people that I know and trust, in terms of their abilities and in terms of their benevolence, I guess I could say, and their honesty, because that's important too. And so,
the voice primarily is coming from the female perspective. So
Word.
Do you have any comments on that, about writing from the female perspective and how you sort of got into that headspace?
Well, my life has always been defined by the women that have been in it, from my grandmother who raised me, to my aunts, to my mom, to my lovers and my friends subsequently. And so it was actually very natural, because at a young age, I always would would sit down and seem keenly interested in in what the women around me had to say. At the heart of it, one of the things that's at the center of it is a sense of loss and a sense of identity. And I think that I was trying to work out my feelings about my thoughts about identity and loss and romance through the eyes of women. And it's a difficult thing to pull off for sure. And that was one of the things I was mostly concerned about with it. And my sort of 12 folks that I asked to read the third draft, most of them were women, and that was one of my key questions for a lot of them was, is this believably, like, can you feel this? Is this believable? I wanted to challenge people's expectations, and it's a very postmodern attempt in terms of how we play with time, in terms of incorporating different formats that you wouldn't, like a menu or a recipe or literary porn into sort of a place where you would normally find it. What did I hope people would get? It's an experience, really. I wanted people to experience the doubt and the fear, and relive their own doubt and fear and from their own breakups and their own sense of loss. And I wanted people to experience the sense of a scattered identity, an identity that isn't so clear cut, that isn't so easy to map out, and ultimately the redemption from that, the opportunity to shed the doubt and shed the fear and shed all identities and sort of emerge into a new self and evolve, hopefully. The hope of that is really what I wanted people to take away.